Hello everyone, welcome back. Happy to start the third session. It will be chaired by Rufus Gouws. Please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. I hope you've had a very nice lunch here in Pretoria. They supplied us with more than enough and we enjoyed it and we are ready for this session. In this session, we are moving from Argentina to Georgia and then back to Greece. We are starting with a presentation by Victoria de Los Angeles, Boschiroli, and Marina Berri. Their topic is lexicographic representation of verbal semantic neology in Spanish dictionaries, and we are looking forward to this presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning from Buenos Aires. Good afternoon in Pretoria. Okay, I'm going to be presenting. I'm Victoria Boschiroli, and Marina is joining me here. So hello to everybody. So I hope you can hear well. Is that right? Yes? Okay. So this presentation is the result. I'm sorry, we are presenting our slides from Buenos Aires. Is that okay? Okay, thank you. So this presentation is a result of our concerns as members of the Red Antenas Neológicas. First, extracting. Oh, sorry about this. We're having trouble making the slides. Okay. So first, extracting press neologisms as members of the network Red Antenas Neológicas, which is actually directed by Judith Preja, who has been here before. And the extraction is done automatically and manually, and recording them in the Observatory Data Bank, BOBNEO, of the EULA. And then we are also involved in writing and editing them in a recent development of Antenas, which is an online dictionary of neologisms of 6 different varieties of Spanish, the Antenario. In previous work, we have explored Spanish verbal neologisms within the framework of Patrick Hank's theory of norms and exploitation. We claim it can be used as a criterion to measure their different degrees of what has been described as neologicity, that is, the gradual property of being new of a lexical item. Today, we will come back to our semantic analysis of these verbs to focus on the problems of their lexicographic representation in general language dictionaries, and how dictionaries of neologisms can help in their treatment. Due to time restraints, we'll be working on just 2 of the verbs, anestesiar, anesthetize, and choreografiar, to choreograph, before to illustrate the kind of problems that come up when they are dictionarized. Our focus is on verbs which are classified as semantic or sense neologisms, that is, existing forms for which a new meaning emerges and spreads to different degrees. So why are they interesting? When compared to other neologisms, we have noticed that they tend to go underdetected or undetected. The rest can be spotted automatically because they are formally different. But semantic neologisms have traditionally been extracted manually. Although there are alternatives, manual is still the best and the most reliable way, since they lack internal formal features to recognize them. So the main way of recognizing them is by observing their syntagmatic structures. Their immediate context is different from the ones of their original meaning. This is a phenomenon that, as we will see, the theory of norms and exploitation provides an explanation for. Finally, in the Spanish-speaking tradition, nominal semantic neologisms have been widely studied in connection to their referential function or their metonymic nature, especially in studies of polysemy, but verbs haven't. Besides being underdetected, or perhaps as a result of this, they are quantitatively underrepresented. As shown in the figures in the slide, when the Real Academia Española updates their Diccionario de la Lengua Española once a year, verbs are at most 10% of all the semantic neologisms treated, and usually less. Addition of new senses to existing verbs or amends to existing definitions appear as a peripheral phenomenon. When we look at dictionaries of neologisms, the situation is similar. Our Antenario, which publishes updates monthly, has published 1,420 entries, 31 of which are semantic neologisms, a very small proportion, and only one is a verb. Whereas in the Neoma dictionary, out of 2,400 published entries, 103 are semantic neologisms and only 7 are verbs. Now, neither under-detection nor under-representation are entirely surprising. As Adelstein points out, a large part of the semantic neologisms aren't usually perceived as neologic by the public. In other words, they don't pass what is called the neologic sentiment test because speakers don't think of them as new. Now, what role do dictionaries of neologisms have in the Spanish language lexicography? Unlike what happens around other national languages, there is a strong tradition in Spanish lexicography to publish dictionaries of neologisms, such as the one shown in the slide. This tradition is a result of the role of the Real Academia, whose dictionary, the Real Academia's dictionary has for Spanish. It is the most prestigious dictionary for Spanish speakers, but traditionally it has adopted prescriptive, Spain-oriented policies. And as a result, they are excessively precautious when it comes to including new words and sentences to the dictionary. As a result, dictionaries of neologisms assume the role of filling the gap between lexical reality and its representation, and have become transitory remedial tools, places where neologisms are collected before moving on to general dictionaries. Now, what exactly are semantic neologisms is in fact a contested issue. There's a tension between their theoretical definition and the instructions for detection or for extraction in the observatories. Semantic neologisms have been defined as a creation or emergence of a new meaning for an existing unit. That's Aderol's definition. However, when it comes to their extraction, according to our Observatorio de Neología and to their guidelines, a semantic neologism is any modification of the meaning of a lexical unit included in dictionaries. This account is clearly more operational than deciding on the nature or status of that change. In other words, if it is a new meaning, a new sense or variation of a meaning, which is impossible if you're confronted with the one use you are extracting. These different perspectives on semantic neology impact differently in lexicographic representation. If what is detected is a change of meaning rather than a new meaning, it will necessarily affect existing senses and definitions in an entry. Whereas if it is a new meaning, it should probably go to a new sense. The results of identifying and recording as semantic neology any modification of the meaning of an existing unit will vary widely. In our bank, if we look at the relationship between the new meaning and the existing meaning, we find metaphoric relationships, metonymic relationships, extensions, restrictions, changes in the semantic prosody, or sometimes combinations of many of these. This suggests that both prototypical and neological meanings should be presented together. There are also different scenarios regarding how widespread or frequent the new sense is, ranging from occasional uses to expanding uses or very frequent uses in different domains. This cannot be determined when first recorded and requires further analysis. Many are derived from nouns, and semantic change may occur in the base. We'll come back to this when we look at the entries. And to make matters worse or more difficult, some are also semantic cults. So to sum up, very different phenomena end up being categorized as semantic neologisms. One of the central claims of the theory of norms and exploitations is quoted in the slide. When a new word develops a new meaning, it develops new phraseological patterns and collocational preferences at the same time. This means that new senses or meanings can be discriminated by identifying phraseological patterns, some of which will be highly recurrent, others just used just once, and yet others somehow frequently. Those uses that represent the same pattern are grouped together through corpus analysis, typically of samples of lines. By septness of pattern, we should understand both syntagmatic and semantic regularity. These conventional recurrent uses are called norms by Hanks. So what is a norm? A norm is a pattern of ordinary usage in everyday language with which a particular meaning is associated. So, for example, we could describe the norm for the prototypical use of coreografía in Spanish, as you can see in the slide. Just like in English, it includes a human agent. The goal of the action is either a musical piece or a dancing activity. And these semantic types are typically realized by the lexical sense, espectaculo, opera, etc. This pattern is further associated with the meaning below. And as you can see in the example, choreograph Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. But these norms can be creatively exploited, hence called these exploitations, following pragmatics definitions. So an exploitation is a deliberate departure from an established pattern of normal word use, that is, from a norm. It's either the point is either to talk about new or unusual things, or to say old things in a new, interesting, or unusual way. So we have an example of an exploitation in Spanish. Did he manage to choreograph his own ending? Did he turn his life into his final performance? So his own ending is he's dead. Now, was it to music? Was it a show? Was it dancing? Well, clearly not. This is clearly an exploitation. According to Hanks, an exploitation can be an isolated event, as we said before, analogous to a nonce word or hapax, or it may end up expanding in use. If it grows more frequent, a new norm can emerge with a new meaning and a different pattern. This passage is usually gradual. Hanks himself characterizes the space between one stage and the other as a gray area, and we'll come back to this characterization later. In neology literature, this phenomenon has been described as neological process. That is, the different stages or life cycle a word goes through since their creation or non-stage to their, hopefully, inclusion in general dictionaries. Given this diachronic dimension, we have pointed out that the theory of norms and exploitations is relevant to study neologicity, especially how semantic neology should be studied and how it is dictionarized. For today's presentation, we have focused on two verbs whose neologicity we have described elsewhere in terms of norms and exploitations, anestesial and choreographial. To check for recency, these non-core uses will be dated based on information from the Real Academia's historical corpora, Corde and Crea. Their frequency will be illustrated by looking at their most frequent collocations in WordSketch, although we have studied this in more depth in through other corpora. Entries from two recently updated general Spanish dictionaries will be analyzed. First, the Real Academia's Diccionario de la Lengua Española, which is updated yearly, as we said before, and second, the Diccionario del Español Actual, whose third edition was published online last year, and which is a corpus-based dictionary first published in the 1990s. Well, let's go to the first case, anestesial, anesthetize. Like in English, the conventional meaning of anestesial is the medical use, to render physically insensible by applying a drug. The slide shows typical examples and the pattern associated with this norm. Something to say about this pattern is that the description could also include the fact that the purpose is usually surgery, and implied is the fact that the human in the second slot is a patient. But other uses have been recorded that deviate from the norm. For example, in the first one, the consumer is not so much confused as it is numbed. The second one, Berlusconi has managed to numb a large part of the population. Notice that the translation of this new use is numb and not anesthetize. In the first example, the human is not a patient, but a consumer. Instead of drugs, there are stimuli. In the second one, we have Berlusconi instead of a doctor, and the goal is the Italian population. So, as regards recency, variations to the norm are not new. The slide shows the first recorded literary case is from 1905, numb for feelings. But already in 1929, there is an example from the press, right? Numb by fear. In total, there are 10 variations out of 28 examples between 1884 and 1969, quite a lot. And there aren't occasional exploitations either. As we can see in these excerpts from Anestesia's WordSketch, there are some regular collocations such as sociedad, society, conciencia, conscience, ciudadanía, citizenship, or sensibilidad, sensitivity, that have been used consistently and repeatedly. So based on this data, we have described these new uses as a secondary pattern shown in the slide. The analysis has shown regular lexical sets as second argument, sociedad, público, public, los jóvenes, the youth. And the analysis has shown and also an overall negative prosody in connection to the meaning. Anestesiar is something which we regard as wrong or bad, unlike what happens with recreational drugs, for example, which is deprive someone of their emotional sensitivity or their capacity for reaction. How is this accounted for in general dictionaries? Well, in the Real Academia Dictionary, the Diccionario de la Lengua Española, there is no trace of this secondary norm, not at all. Anestesiar is represented as a monosemous verb in its medical meaning. The base anesthesia is used in the definition, but there are no further explanations of the noun either. On the other hand, the Diccionario del Español Actual looks a bit more promising because it does offer two explanations, two definitions, two senses. Now, the first one is the medical sense, right? Again, notice the style of the definition, quite similar to the pattern description of the first norm, suggesting it is based on corpus data. However, yes, you have a parte del cuerpo, body part, por medio de un fármaco, through a drug, con fines quirúrgicos, for surgical purposes. However, after the definition, we find the label también figurado, also figurative, suggesting there is a non-conventional use, which in fact isn't explained. Now, contrasting with the analytical style of the first one, in the second sense, instead of explanations, two near synonyms are offered. Apagar, which is basically deaden, and adormecer, be numb. And as a collocation, we have just algo, something. These are two highly polysemous verbs which could easily replace the first meaning, so the result is really confusing, right? Now, in the advanced view of the entry, examples are displayed. So for the first sense, there's the examples, and the third one, la televisión nos anestesia, okay, does TV numbers, matches our second norm. But the examples in the second sense mix the medical sense. The first one, el hielo, anestesia, las sensaciones nauseosas, that would be eyes anesthetizing nauseous feelings, with exploitations. For example, la anestesia, la lucidez is anesthetized lucidity. As a result, while the prototypical norm is properly represented, once again, the second one isn't. The figurative label, the examples, the second definition, neither of these strategies of including the figurative label, the examples, or the second definition account for the semantic and phraseological specificity of our secondary norm. Now, our second case is choreograph. Again, the conventional primary norm associated with dance is shown and exemplified in the slide. As you can see, is the same as in English. Choreograph the Thomas Ninth Symphony. There's no difference between this use, and the English use. Now, in these cases, besides the exploitations that we presented earlier in the presentation, we have found some uses that appear regularly and frequently in the corpus. Coreografiar una escena de sexo, choreograph sexual scenes in the second example, and coreografiar escenas de acción, action scenes that were choreographed to the last detail, both associated to films. Although these uses are more recent than the previous case, the first one is from 2001, and the word sketch shows it is very frequent. There are roughly the same amount of primary collocations with ballet, baile, dance, rutina, routine, as with the secondary, secuencia, sequence, escena, scene, pelea, fight. Therefore, recurrent new uses can't be regarded as mere exploitations. However, in this case, if we focus on the sense and the phraseological pattern, rather than a new norm, what there seems to be is an extension of the existing norm. The prosody hasn't changed, and although the music element is optional, the basic meaning of planned sequence of movements remain. As a result, we have proposed the extended norm shown in the slide rather than a separate new one. Unsurprisingly, again, the Diccionario de la Lengua Española, la Real Academia, only records the primary norm in connection to dance. Again, the definition cross refers to the noun, focused entirely on the dance meaning. And once again, the Diccionario del Español Actual offers two definitions. The first one explains the prototypical sense, is analytical and like the Real Academia's cross refers to the noun. We would expect the second one to explain the recurrent variations we described before. However, this sense refers to literary uses, not everyday uses, which are cryptically explained as give something, which is not specified, the character of choreography. The examples don't help much either. Both are actually exploitations. In one, the argument is todo, everything, hardly a semantic type, and on the whole of the second sense fails to account for a regular use, and the extended uses remain unrepresented. So, every time we carry out this kind of analysis, we end up needing to remind ourselves, what is the role of a monolingual language dictionary aimed at humans? We'd like to focus on two of the many answers to this question. One is, again, facts. The facts recorded in dictionaries are, or should be, the very facts about the shared linguistic conventions on which participants in conversation rely. So, shared facts. The second one is Kilgariff's definition of the SPIP criterion. A usage type merits listing in a dictionary when it is sufficiently frequent and insufficiently predictable. In other words, no regular polysemy. Now, in our analysis of semantic neological verbs, we have found that their structural and semantic reality differs significantly from their representation in general language dictionaries. If we look at the dictionary entries we've analyzed from Hanks and Kilgariff's perspective, we can see that although it makes sense to record explicitly new uses whose stabilization is not entirely predictable, in our analysis of lexicographic entries, we have found that the main general dictionaries ignore altogether documented variations from primary norms in spite of their low neologicity. This is the case of the Diccionario de Real Academia, Larousse, and El Diccionario del Uso del Español, which we haven't analyzed here, but they have exactly the same treatment of just one meaning. On the other hand, when these uses are treated and recorded, and as in the second case, the Diccionario del Español Actual, there are several inconsistencies. As regards examples, they mix exploitations that are not frequent, therefore not shared, with stabilized secondary uses that are frequent, hence socially shared, and not predictable. The use of the label fig, figurative, for figurative uses is inconsistent. Sometimes it is included, as with anestesiar first meaning. Sometimes it isn't, as in the case of choreografiar. It also seems to cover widely unlikely cases, conventional uses, rather than usual ones. Hence, it ends up being deprived from any explanatory power it may have. It does not replace definitions and should be used carefully. Moreover, both the label and those strange, inaccurate, broad definitions that cover new meanings, extended meanings, and exploitations, and don't specify collocations. We mean the second meanings, the second senses in each case studied. Thus, they fail to grasp both the structural and semantic stability that is characteristic of a secondary sense. And overall, we find there is confusion between exploitations and uses that fall into the gray area and are closer to a brand new norm, as in the case of anestesiar, or a modification or extension of a previous norm, as in choreography. So, what are our conclusions? Shall we say recommendation? We need to, regarding general dictionaries, especially when it comes to their updates, we need to adopt a systematic approach to the incorporation of these verbs that anticipates how to deal with the gray area between exploitations and secondary or new norms, specifying what criteria will be taken into account to try to sort them, and how to describe extended meanings and new meanings, whether they will be incorporated into existing definitions and how, or as substances, or what kind of explanations there should be for them, accounting for collocations, and eventually the use of the label fig, perhaps for gray area examples, where the collocations are increasingly vague and the meaning increasingly specified. Regarding dictionaries of neologisms, given their remedial role in Spanish lexicography, they seem to be the best place to account for the gray area. We need to plan the systematical inclusion of neological and semantic verbs and find ways to explicitly account for the different semantic modifications of existing meanings, such as extension of choreography from dance to movies. So on the one hand, there should be room for secondary uses or gray area cases. On the other, primary senses should be made explicit somehow, for example, in a note, to account for their status. Finally, regarding detection, extraction, and recording of verbal semantic neologisms in neologism banks, we need to zoom in into this phenomenon. We should revise our guidelines and implement more systematic ways of detecting them, including in the future, perhaps, new technology. So, thank you very much.
Very much for an informative and very interesting paper. We have time for 2 or perhaps 3 short questions. So, any questions from Pretoria or anywhere else in the universe? So far, no questions, which does not mean that we don't have answers. Would you like to add any more comments? Would you like to pose a question to yourself?
Oh, there are so many questions that we pose to ourselves. Well, the first question, of course, is how technology, we are looking forward to technological developments that will help us extract semantic neologisms in general, but especially verbal neologisms. The fact that the phraseological pattern is relevant, I think, means that there's hopes, and I know that we are aware that there are different attempts at this, but that they have not been that successful yet. So this is the first one, because in fact, one of the biggest problems is under detection. I mean, from that starting point, then everything else becomes a roller coaster, and in fact, going down rather than up, let's say. So yes, that's the first thing.
I have a question here from the floor. Ilan Kuhneman, please, Ilan, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the talk. Hi. In your conclusions, you recommended having a plan for systematic inclusion in dictionaries of neology. So would you like to elaborate? Would you have any recommendations how to do that?
Okay. First of all, I think, well, it is a big issue what items are included into dictionaries of neologisms. But I think that since they're not so obvious and since they're under-detected, it's a little bit like we should give this a quota, right? And focus on, before we start, say, okay, a certain percentage should be devoted to semantic neologisms in general, and particularly verbal semantic neologisms that are more difficult to clearly to spot and to recognize as neologisms. So this is, I mean, because when you look at lists, obviously formal neologisms stand out more clearly, right? When you look at keyword analysis or the list of collections of neologisms that every year we collect at the laboratorio, at the observatorio, and they don't stand out. So I think that's the first thing, like quota of semantic neologisms, and focus on them and to see whether this happens. Secondly, we truly believe that there should be analytical tools such as, well, we have proposed theory of norms and exploitations, but there might be other frameworks that could contribute to doing this. And thirdly, I think one of the problems is that when you look at a dictionary and you see a word which you already know, such as choreography, it looks strange to find it deprived of their original context. So somehow that there should be a provision in the representation in the entry to and do this in, I mean, that guidelines should provide for this before the whole process is undertaken every year or every month or whatever.
Thank you. We have one question here from Chris Haylen.
Not done in Spanish.
The question is there
will be done in other languages, not done in Spanish, clearly.
Sorry, can you hear me? The question from Chris Halen, is there a verb pattern dictionary for Spanish that you could rely on to identify new exploitations?
Oh, there is an example. There is one which developed by Irene Renaud in the Verbario. Would you like to present it? Yes. Okay. Anyway, this has it's a project like well, because from lack of funds has not been updated, but they started developing a yes, a dictionary of patterns, much like the pattern dictionary developed by Hanks. Now we have found that many of the verbs that we identified as neologic are not covered there, right? That this is a problem that is clearly dodged because there are no easy solutions. Clearly, yes. So there is it's the Verbario. You can check it online, but it's incomplete. It's not complete.
Okay, thank you very much. There's some nice clapping of hands for you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your contribution ever so much. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Now we're moving from Buenos Aires to Tiflis to Tbilisi in Georgia. Tamar Laluashvili and Tinatin Margalitadze from the Ilian State University will address us on semi-automatic detection of new words in Georgian. And the screen and the mic belongs to you.
Thank you very much, dear Rufus. Tamuna and I extend our greetings from Georgia, Tbilisi. We would love to be with you on site, but this is how it is. So today I'm presenting our new research on neology together with my PhD student, and I will try to share the screen. Just a second. So do you see our presentation?
Yes, we do. Thank you very much.
Yes. Rufus, do you see? All right. So Tamar will begin the presentation and then I will continue.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be the part of this workshop today, and thank you for having me. I will start a brief introduction and then move on to the main parts of the project. The present study is a part of 3-year project dedicated to the comprehensive study of neologisms in the modern Georgian language. And this work is supported by Rustaveli National Science Foundation of Georgia. And with this presentation, we aim to present the methodology worked out at Ilian State University for the semi-automatic detection of new words in modern Georgian language. Changes taking place in a language are usually very slow and very difficult to notice, and these changes occur over a very long period before they become perceptible on a synchronic level. But there are some exceptions from this general tendency, and the contemporary Georgian language is a very good example of this. Currently, Georgia and the Georgian language are in an interesting era from a historical point of view. Since after the collapse of the former Soviet Union, our country saw the rapid emergence and rapid development of a free market economy, a multi-party political system, private banking sector, the Georgian national armed forces, and so on. They developed intense relations with foreign countries on diplomatic as well as on an educational, economic, and merely personal levels. These processes are only intensified by the increasing availability of computer, telecommunication, and mobile technologies. Consequently, all prerequisites are in place which cause considerable changes in the Georgian lexis. The detection and study of latent diachronic processes taking place in the Georgian language becomes especially interesting at this linguistic historical moment. The study of neologisms is particularly relevant for lexicography, which, in addition to studying the theoretical aspects of the issue, also serves purely practical purposes. It involves updating existing dictionaries, adding new words, and assigning new meanings to the already existing ones. And contemporary users evaluate the quality of dictionaries by their ability to keep pace with the latest vocabulary and meanings. That the dictionaries that fail to capture modern vocabulary of the language tend to lose their appeal and popularity. Our study has revealed that many words which have entered the vocabulary of the Georgian language in the 21st century are not attested in the either explanatory or orthographic dictionaries of the Georgian language or in other Georgian foreign bilingual dictionaries that have been published recently. And I will talk about say a few words about the neologisms. In the most general definition, neologisms are words that appear in a language, and in many cases, the reason for their emergence is new things, new phenomena or concepts that a language community learns and needs to give a name. New words may be coined in language or borrowed from other languages. The coinage of new words is interesting. Their study reveals lexical creativity of a language at a certain stage of its development. Borrowings may reflect something really new for the speakers of the borrowing language. But borrowings may be caused by the prestige of another language. In this case, there arise synonyms in a language, considering of a foreign and native word pairs, consisting the development of new senses of existing words is an important type of neologisms as well. Sense development is often the result of semantic borrowing and is influenced by a foreign tongue and polysemy of a similar word in a foreign language. There is also syntactic neologisms connected to the emergence of new grammatical constructions. And all these types of neologisms can be found in the modern Georgian language. Even on the morphological level, despite the fact that Georgian language is very complex, has a very complex vocabulary, and especially very complex morphology, and the Georgian verb is particularly rich in grammatical categories like inflectional categories such as person, number, mood, tense, iteration, sequence of actions, also derivational categories like aspect, voice, version, causative, location, direction, orientation. We still observe the development of some analytical constructions in modern Georgian verb, which can be regarded as morphological neologisms. General language consists of different registers. Alongside literary language, there is also a colloquial language, slang, dialectal words, and technical language, and neologisms may appear in any register of language, both in written and in oral. Some neologisms originate in the literary language or scientific field, while others appear in colloquial speech, slang, or dialects. We observe appearance of neologisms in all registers of modern Georgian. As for the methodology, neologisms introduced in the Georgian language have been focus of many Georgian researchers, but there was no established methodology for identifying new words in modern Georgian. Therefore, we decided to work out such methodology, and for this purpose, we studied existing methods of detecting new words for other languages, and then we formulated our approach. In our study, we concentrate on new words as a methodology which will be discussed later, identify formal neologisms or new words. Since developments of words require different approach, and we have not addressed this in this study. For this study, a corpus was composed, and two lemmatizers were applied to it. The first one was used, the first lemmatizer served as an exclusion source, and the second one was used for reducing number of neologism candidates. This will be also discussed later in more details. The corpus includes textual materials from Georgian online newspapers and magazines, as well as news websites, websites of governmental and non-governmental organizations, and also Georgian Wikipedia. And in total, there are approximately 2 million tokens in our corpus. Encyclopedia Wikipedia is interesting from several points of view. It has, as it has many authors and many articles on different topics such as music, cinema, history, art, politics, and many others. While many websites contain grammatically incorrect texts, so Wikipedia's sentences are much better structured and grammatically correct. But on the other hand, Georgian Wikipedia contains many typos, which makes it very difficult to reduce the number of potential neologisms. We have collected over 55 websites for building building our corpus, and of these 13 are magazines and newspapers, 11 are news websites, 9 are from non-governmental and non-governmental organizations, and the rest are from different governmental agencies, and also we have Georgian Wikipedia. Web crawlers were designed for downloading materials from these websites. These websites of different genres were analyzed individually in order to identify those websites which are most productive with regard to generation of neologisms, and this information will be helpful. It will be important in the next stage when we'll be set up a website for the monitoring of neologisms according to the methodology which we developed. There were 5 main stages involved in the corpus. These stages include the creation of web crawlers, retrieving the material from different websites, the processing material in Lexbox, and cleaning the material from unnecessary information, also uploading the material to the lemmatizer. Lexbox is an advanced software tool designed for analyzing language data and corpora. This tool was developed by a team of researchers at Lancaster University with Dr. Václav Brzina leading the project, and this tool, Lexbox, was used for tokenization of downloading our materials, textual materials.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamuna. Now I will continue with the lemmatizers. So as mentioned by Tamuna, 2 lemmatizers were used in our research. The first is the lemmatization tool for the Georgian language, developed under the direction of Irina Lovzhanidze, a professor at Ilia State University, Tbilisi, Georgia. This lemmatizer was created on the basis of the finite state lexicon compiler, Lexi, which is a tool for creating lexical transducers. The lexicon of the morphological analyzer created with this tool is based on the explanatory dictionary, 8-volume explanatory dictionary of the Georgian language. So the lemmas are taken from this dictionary, and also Damana Melikishvili's verb index. So initially, the lexicon comprised 78,000 units for nouns and 85,000 units for verbs. Later, the lexicon was supplemented with data obtained during the corpus testing process. But the thing is that this lemmatizer was not trained to recognize unknown words, and therefore it can recognize only the lemmas which are included in its lexicon, in its dictionary. And this enabled us to use this tool as a kind of exclusion source. To compare, to lemmatize the words which we tokenized with the help of Langsbox from our corpus. This lemmatizer is available on the website of Ilia State University at the URL which you see on the slide. As our research has shown, a considerable segment of the vocabulary of the contemporary Georgian language is not represented in Georgian explanatory and orthographic dictionaries, and as a result, the set lemmatizer cannot identify them. So this fact allowed us to use this lemmatizer, as I have already mentioned, as an exclusion source. Words not recognized by this tool, that is unlemmatized out of vocabulary lexis, was the list where we looked for neology candidates. After the tokenization and lemmatization of the corpus material, the out-of-vocabulary lexical units were subjected to analysis and the potential neologisms were sampled. While analyzing out-of-vocabulary lexis, we detected that they contained not only neology candidates, but also undocumented lexis, which cannot be considered to be neologies, but are not documented in dictionaries. The study of this segment of Georgian vocabulary is very important, but it needs another methodology, and we could not deal with it within the framework of this research. In order to differentiate neology candidates from undocumented vocabulary, we had to rely on our intuition, knowledge of Georgian, and experience as lexicographers. Because part of the work was done manually, we consider our methodology semi-automatic and not fully automatic approach. In order to reduce the number of out-of-vocabulary lexis, we applied to it another lemmatizer developed by the Norwegian scholar Paul Meurer for the Georgian National Corpus. The Georgian National Corpus contains over 200 million tokens, and Paul Meurer's lemmatizer can recognize much more words than the one applied by us for the first phase as an exclusion source. Paul Meurer's lemmatizer is also based on the finite state technology, but it contains a much larger dictionary, and the author has developed a guesser and is still developing it for guessing and lemmatizing unknown words. In addition, lists of geographical and proper names were generated by us, which Paul Meurer added to his lemmatizer. After lemmatizing out-of-vocabulary lexis in Paul Meurer's tool, the number of unlemmatized vocabulary was reduced by 45%. One more platform used by us was the Georgian word embedding platform. The word embedding this platform includes 1.5 billion words, making it one of the largest databases in the history of Georgian linguistics. It allows us to collect words that are semantically related to each other. For example, when we enter a desired word from any language register into the search bar, the word embedding will present, well, as you all know, this similar tool will present up to 30 different words from the same register, simplifying the collection of lexicographical material. For example, with the embedding of the word online media, we extracted more neologisms like internet media, internet portali, internet televizia. So I think we don't need to translate this and so on. At this stage, we have collected 15,000 lexical neologisms in modern Georgian. We mostly selected words that belong to the common vocabulary of Georgian, including colloquial words and slang. We also selected some general terms from the fields of social media, online media, tourism. New terms from very specialized fields were excluded from the study. The preliminary, now what we have discovered is that among these 1,500 lexical neologisms, there are borrowings, there are hybrid words, there are internal creations, there are loan translations. We have neologisms in colloquial speech, in slang, and now we are in the process of analyzing these 1,500 lexical neologisms. We are classifying them according to thematic groups. It's very interesting because it shows, for example, which fields are developed in Georgia. Just to give you an example, neologisms like agrobarati, agrobusinessi, agrostartupi, agrokrediti, agroleasingi, agrodazwewa, agroprodukti, agroroboti, and so on and so forth. They show that agriculture is developing in our country, and also tourism, because we have agrotourism, and Huinisturi wine tour. Wine, you know, Georgia is a wine producing country. So this business, wine tours, are very rapidly, they have already developed, actually, not are developing. So some of our findings, which we would like to share with you, and we hope that we will be able to present the analysis of our neologisms, the sources of our neologisms, and we will be able to present it at the next gathering of GlobalX or other lexicographic gatherings. But just to share with you some of our findings, we have hybrid words where one part of the word is borrowing and the other part is Georgian. For example, internet banking, internet kamutsema, internet portali, internet journali, internet reklama, and so on. So we have such hybrids. So we also observe the development of Georgian words. So Georgian words become more and more popular if we had more influx of Anglicisms from the beginning. And of course, the majority of these 1,500 words are Anglicisms, as you probably already have seen from the examples. But we also see the tendency to have Georgian words. For example, for social network terminology like dalaikeba, datagwa, like to like, to tag, and the social network terminology. Alongside borrowings, we see the appearance of Georgian words. And the Georgian words are based on semantic borrowing, so they are created on the analogy with the English words to like, to tag, and page, and to follow, and friend, and so on. And these words become literary, while the borrowings more belong to the colloquial speech. We also see the intensification of some Georgian prefixes, because we have a language with very rich suffixes and prefixes, like, for example, da and eba have become very active. Da non seba, da prendeba, da porvardeba, da kenseleba, da sheareba, and so on. We see neologisms also in the slang, and if before, in the Soviet period, the source of the slang was mostly the Russian language and also other sources, for example, the speech of Georgian Jews. Now we see that the source of new young slang that Tamuna and her generation use, Gen Z slang, is mostly coming from the English language, and I think you can recognize these words like krashi, cringy, crinjoba, dastalgwa. So these are very popular neologisms in the Georgian slang. I don't know how long they will stay in the Georgian language, but at the present moment, they are very popular. Based on the research carried out, we plan to make an online dictionary of neologisms and publish it online. We hope to perfect the methodology and tools for the detection of neologisms, and our ultimate goal is to set up a website for the monitoring of neologisms in future, which will be published on the website of Ilia State University. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tamar and Tinatin. We have ample time for questions and discussions. Anyone from the floor or from the screen? Nothing so far on my cell phone.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, we have a question here from Professor Sonja Bosch. I just want to hand the mic to her.
Thank you very much for an interesting and insightful presentation. It's more a comment than a question, but I was glad to hear that you could actually use the XFST guesser, the finite state guesser, to determine which lemmas had not been included. We did a morphological analyzer for isiZulu rule-based, also using the Xerox finite tools, or the finite tools, and it's very useful. And you, of course, fortunate that you have another lemmatizer that could complement this process. Thank you.
We also think that we are lucky thanks to Paul Moirer.
Thank you, Victoria. You had a question?
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. And we think it's a fascinating project. Congratulations. And there was there's something I don't know if I didn't catch or it wasn't clear. What exactly do you mean by undocumented lexes?
Mm-hmm. For example, I will give you an example. There is a word in Georgian, brzengatsi, which is literally a wise man. And brdzeni, of course, this is a word, and of course this word exists in the language, but this compound word, brzengatsi, of course it has been for ages in the Georgian language, but surprisingly it is not in the dictionary. So we found that there are a lot of such words in the dictionary, and I remember at one of the conferences I was talking about one of the Georgian lexicographer, and somebody asked me how many words are there in Georgian. And I could not answer because this is an issue. This is a problem of monolingual lexicography in Georgia, that we don't know how many words we have. And here our study is actually a proof to this, that words like wise men are not included in the dictionary. But this is another project, you know. We were tempted to include it in our online dictionary, but we have a grant project, so we have to finish it within 3 years' time. And if we decide to make it inflated with undocumented vocabulary, this 3 years will not be enough. And besides, we think that our methodology is not sufficient to have the whole list of undocumented vocabulary. I think that this is another project and another methodology should be elaborated for this.
Oh, thank you very much. This is fascinating because it is a problem even in Spanish, since there's so many varieties of Spanish, and Spanish is such a large language. One of the big frustrations precisely with the general dictionaries, or even if they're updated, is that they still don't include very common everyday language which we would not consider neological at all, right? So thank you very much for this.
Thank you for your question.
The frustration.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, comments, remarks? If not, thank you very much, Tamar and Tinatin. A most informative presentation. And now we are moving further on. All screens lead to Athens. And our next presentation will be by Anna Vacalopoulou with the topic Digging for Ings, a survey of selected pseudo-Anglicisms in dictionaries of modern Greek. Thank you very much, Anna. We are awaiting your presentation.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much, Rufus. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see it now? Okay. Thank you very much, Rufus, and thank you, workshop organizers, for bringing together such an interesting variety of topics on neology and lexicography. And thank you, Georgian team. I can never get over how beautiful your script is in Georgian. I always admire that. I am Anna Vacalopoulou. I am a lexicographer. I work with the Institute for Language and Speech Processing of the Athena Research Center in Greece, Athens. I'm going to talk to you about Anglicism and pseudo-Anglicisms in the dictionary, some dictionaries of modern Greek. I would like to apologize in advance in case there are any problems with my connections, because unfortunately there are some wildfires here in the wider area, and there have been some problems with the power. I was disconnected 3 times. I hope it doesn't happen, and I hope the fires are off soon anyway. First, I would like to give you a little background of this modest research of mine. The motivation for this research was a presentation in one of the previous GlobalX workshops on lexicography and neology. It was given by Lars Trapp Jensen, and I thank him for that inspiration. And the title of his presentation was Language Internal Neologisms and Anglicisms, dealing with new words and expressions in the Danish dictionary. That presentation dealt with, among other things, with the process of spotting Anglicisms and pseudo-Anglicisms, mainly in the media area, and then choosing or not choosing to include them in this particular dictionary according to a list of certain criteria. We did hear about this list of criteria earlier by Ilan when he described the attempts to come up to certain criteria for inclusion in the context of the Neology cost project. I thought it would be interesting after hearing that presentation, but this year to reverse this process and look at how existing dictionaries of Greek have been treating Anglicisms and pseudo-Anglicisms. So this research is more meta-lexicographic instead of following the process from within the editorial team of a dictionary of lexicographers. So let's briefly remember what Anglicisms are. An Anglicism is created when a language borrows a lexical item from English and incorporates it into its lexicon, into its vocabulary. Typical examples in Greek and everywhere else in the world, I guess, almost, include words such as CD, sandwich, and most recently words like selfie. The process of incorporating an Anglicism in Greek or any other language for that matter, that is doing the borrowing part, it can be reflected at various levels in that language. It can be at the phonological level. We heard about some of these categories in the previous presentation, in its morphology, in its orthographical representation, the spelling. Of course, also at the grammar or the syntax, as we heard before, and of course, mainly at the level of vocabulary. We all know that for historical reasons, because of the global prominence of the English language, Anglicisms are the most widely spread lexical items that are borrowed at a global level. And this is also true for the Greek language, of course. And this trend has become stronger by the introduction of vocabulary from international business, mainly, with lexical items such as meeting in the context of business meeting, and of course, new technologies, most notably computers, including the word computer itself, and the internet with words like selfie, etc. These were all originally coined in the English language and very quickly made and keep making their way into the Greek lexicon. So the main domains in which Anglicisms are spread in Greek today are these three that you see here on this screen. The phenomenon, of course, is widespread, and Anglicized vocabulary is also known to have social implications and political implications in various countries and their corresponding societies and cultures. And these here are only three examples in which we see such implications even at the governmental level from Italy, France, and Russia. Ciao, hello, no. Italy's right-wing government wants to ban English words with 100,000 euro fines. Académie Française denounces rise of English words in public life. The French language Guardian warns an explosion in the use of Anglicisms by organization risks social division, and Russia bans government officials from using most foreign words. Why did I bother to collect this? Because to me, this highlights the importance of this phenomenon and why specific policies probably need to be drawn for the inclusion of these lexical items in dictionaries, of course, on a national or language level of each language, because its society and culture is different. And in the context of the fact that, however descriptive we might like to think that we are, the dictionary is still considered to be an authority in most countries and by a lot of people. So let's look at the way in which Anglicisms can be incorporated into Greek. In some cases, they are adopted verbatim in the Latin alphabet, which is, of course, not our alphabet. We have the Greek alphabet mostly. But this is especially true for the new ones, of course, the new entries like walk in the past few years, which hasn't been transliterated. Some are transliterated, and this is particularly true usually after some time in which these lexical items have been in use. For example, sandwich, very old, and selfie, newer. And there are also cases in which both forms exist at the same time. I mean, both like CD, which is both seen, both in dictionaries and in the rest of the world, in Latin alphabet and in Greek alphabet. So it's we could say that we have a hybrid way of incorporating some Anglicisms in Greek. I don't know if other languages do that. I don't think that Georgia does, but okay, we can discuss that later if you want. You can look at some of these examples here with the Anglicism here in the frame, the green frame. This says the walk agenda, which is in Latin character, the walk part. Here we have CD in both in Latin and in Greek alphabet in the same source. Here it says this sign called sandwiches, which is properly transliterated, the whole sign. And in this last example, there's an interesting twist. By the way, this is our current Prime Minister taking a selfie. And the twist here is that it says super selfie down there, right? We have selfie, which is the Anglicism transliterated. Well, they're both Anglicism, but the selfie is a neologism. And it's transliterated into the Greek alphabet, but the word super is in Latin alphabet. Is very, very peculiar because it has been in the Greek lexicon for decades, of course. But this goes to show you what I mentioned before, that there's still some unease. It's awkward when it comes to switching between alphabets in general in Greece. We haven't decided yet how to present things like that. The official guideline, of course, exists, and it is towards transliteration, but this is not always followed. It is followed mostly in the dictionaries that I am going to use some examples now. And of course, there are also some pseudo-Anglicisms, that is words that appear to be or sound English but are not English, or they might be English but they are not usually used, or they're not at all used in the same meaning. They have a different meaning in the borrowing language. And a famous recent example in Greek is this one, click away. That was coined in 2021 during the COVID pandemic, and it refers to a purchase made by paying in advance and picking up the item outside the store after making an appointment with the store. So a strange thing in strange times. And of course, we can have the phrasal verb click away in English normally, but it means, of course, something totally different, as we all know. So in this study, I focused on ing nouns, which are, of course, formed from the present participle and gerund of verbs. And I compared the way in which these are treated in 5 Greek dictionaries in terms of their macrostructure, that means if they're included or not, as well as their treatment in the microstructure, mainly in terms of their orthography, the spelling that is, and their domain to which they belong according to the dictionaries. So these are the 5 dictionaries that were researched. As you can see, 3 of them are the products of professional lexicographers, while the other two are works of crowdsourcing. And just to anticipate any questions from anyone, I chose to include slang.gr and Wiktionary as crowdsourcing works because, of course, like Petra said before, they are more inclusive usually for practical reasons than other dictionaries. They tend to be quicker in including neologisms in general than authoritative, so to speak, dictionaries because they're not so professional. Of course, their level of quality, as we heard, is varied and not always top. But still, I wanted to compare if between these two types of dictionaries in terms of inclusion. And let's go to some of the findings here. As far as inclusion is concerned, first, you can see here that the totals in the first row of the ing items that are included in each of these dictionaries. Some dictionaries, of course, are more inclusive than others. For example, the middle one, Milnev, is a commercial dictionary. It's a professional dictionary by professional lexicographers and has much more items than all the others combined with ing ending. But it's natural because this dictionary is like others, the crowdsourcing one, is an open work. It's an ongoing work in progress. So it's enriched all the time, and these types of dictionaries, of course, tend to include many more neologisms and many more words in general, of course. Out of these ing structures, most of them are Anglicisms. In the majority of the dictionaries, they are Anglicisms, whereas pseudo-Anglicisms are far less. Probably because they're not considered proper words, I don't know. But however, this is dramatically reversed, as you see, when it comes to the last dictionary, which is a crowdsourced work devoted to slang. It's slang.gr. We have the reverse result here. Pseudo-Anglicisms prevail here. Of course, again, there is no editorial policy, there is no uniformity, there is no style guide, of course. And the content depends solely on the interests of its external contributor. And it's probably also because we all know that slang dictionaries do tend to have this flair for humor within time. So I think that was the reason mainly why these items were chosen, because they're also funny and interesting to contributors. Not necessarily because they're very frequent or frequently used. So then I looked at the orthography and the spelling variants, and I found that the vast majority of the words do tend to be written in the Greek alphabet, following the official guideline of the state. And also, most of them follow the official spelling rules of modern Greek, which is towards simplification, simplified, so to speak, orthography and spelling for foreign loans, for loan words. This is a general instruction for modern Greek. But however, we have 62 alternative spelling variants that were influenced by the spelling of the original word in English and did not follow this rule of simplification according to modern Greek. So from Anglicisms to pseudo-Anglicisms now, of course, I told you already that slang.gr, the crowdsourced dictionary, had the most pseudo-Anglicisms from any other dictionary. And the only items that were also included in two of the other dictionaries, just two, were all military slang, which was a total surprise to me. I don't know why this happens, but it seems to be very widespread, military slang. I mean, military slang ending with ing, words being coined in that pattern. And it is true also, because I checked them, I cross-checked with two very large corpora, and I found out that this is true. They tend to be prevalent in terms of domain. So the most frequent items in the dictionaries are tapping. This is interesting. It comes from the word tapa, which is hoe, the tool, the gardening tool, hoe, and it's the act of removing weeds with a hoe to prevent fires, right? And roping, which comes from ropa, which is cigarette butt, and it means to remove discarded cigarette butts in order to clean up the area. So these are typical chores given mainly to newly recruited soldiers in the Greek army. And according to the findings, these are the most frequent pseudo-Anglicisms that come up a lot lately in the context of army jargon. Other domains exist as well, and this is my last slide. In general, the most prominent domains in which pseudo-Anglicisms tend to emerge in modern Greek are sex, sexual acts, military, like I said, and drinking. And this is in the exact order or frequency that I found them in these dictionaries. So interesting results. I was definitely surprised by these results, especially with the army jargon. And I look forward to continuing this research because I think it will reveal more things in the future. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm available for questions if you want.
Thank you very much, Anna. You've given us quite a bit to think about, and I suppose also to ask questions about. Any questions, colleagues, from the floor, from wherever you are? While we're waiting for other questions, I would just like to know that example of a super selfie. Do you have other forms in Greek where you have that combination of the Latin and the Greek alphabet in a single complex word?
Oh, a lot. That was not a word, of course. It was a combination, like a compound, not one word, but a phrase, so to speak. But there are a lot, and I think it's worth researching into that. I intend to do so. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, yeah. We do. It's a very awkward thing for us because most people are speakers of at least English or another foreign language in the Latin character, and they tend to it's easy for them to combine. So we have these strange constructions, so to say.
Thank you. Now it's less Greek to me. Any other questions? Yeah, we have a question from Professor Sonja Bosch.
Thank you very much, Anna. That was really very insightful. I just want to ask you, you mentioned that the process of Anglicism can be reflected at various levels, and one of those was grammar. I don't know whether I missed something, but do you have an example of that, of a grammar level?
No. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. I didn't. That was a general introduction on, how this can be manifested in language. I didn't look at that at all. The Armenian colleagues before did mention some examples in syntax, I think, for Armenian, but I didn't. I just looked at the vocabulary part. That was a very limited research. I didn't look for that at all. I was general comment.
Okay, that's good.
Sorry,
it was just, it would be interesting once you reach that stage to see, and it probably happens in other languages as well. But thank you very much. I'll be on the lookout for that.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Ilan Kerneman has a question. He's coming to the floor. We'll be with you in a moment, Victoria.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the... Vicky, do you have a question? Did you want to ask something?
Yes, I do.
So
And
you
just
go
a
ahead.
short question. Anna, thank you very much for the presentation. Do you think, how frequent, you say that these words belong to the military domain, and then they are quite restricted to certain domains. How frequent are they, and do you think they are likely candidates to go into dictionaries? Because perhaps the thing is that they are not perceived as actual words, and that's the reason why they don't get dictionarized, as we say in Spanish.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Vicky. We use the same in Greek as well. Well, yes, you're right. I think the general perception is that they're not real words. They are humorous constructions, something like that in the middle. But the ones that I did mention, and I explained what they mean, are in 3 dictionaries. And not all of them are crowdsourced. There's a commercial dictionary among them. So this means that they have become part of the lexicon and the vocabulary. And I also cross-checked with 2, with the, it was the Greek Web 2019 corpus from Sketch Engine. And we do have a very extensive corpus, which is now really an LLM, and we use it, for in other applications. And it comes, they come up a lot. This construction, they're not, and I don't think they are just restricted to military uses anymore, because they are so often, they have been extended, I think. So, for example, you might go. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might go on holiday.
Yes.
And you can say, now it's time to do some whopping, which means clean up the beach from all the cigarette butts. And it's not military use anymore. We do use them.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is interesting because we were checking in our dictionary of neologisms and we don't have a single one. And there are many uses in Spanish too. So probably there is this perception that they are too neological too. So that's an interesting thing, right? Yes, in spite of their being widespread.
You don't have them in your dictionaries at all?
In our not at all, and we were surprised to find that we have not included a single one, while they're quite used. I mean, there are many Anglicisms with ing that change the meaning that we have included, but there's none of these mixed Spanish and English, which are quite frequent too. So, thank you.
Thank you, Elon. Please.
Thank you, Anna, for your presentation. And first, an observation about those 2 military words. I couldn't help noticing that both involve removing things and kind of cleaning up or this kind of work. You had it in your definition twice. I wanted to ask regarding the difference between the authoritative dictionaries and the others. Was that connected with orthography? You mentioned roughly there are like 3/4 of the numbers you gave are of authoritative orthography, and about 1/4 is not. Is there a connection in that?
Thank you, Ilan. First of all, to your observation, yes, true. I was surprised myself also, but this is, like I said, the fate of the new recruiter in the Greek army, basically removing things and doing chores like that. And to your question now, yes, it was not. I mean, in general, because the official guideline is towards transliteration. Like I said, this is from the Ministry of Education. It has been in the guidelines since the 70s, and it is being followed in general in all across all dictionaries, be them commercial, authoritative, or institutional, or crowdsourced. That was across everything. You do see a little mix, like we said before, in some dictionaries. Some have it as an alternative form, the Latin alphabet, but you do see a lot in real life outside dictionaries, like in science, like even in the media, in books, everywhere. This is very true, and it happens every day, everywhere, and it's confusing to anyone who is trying to read Greek, I guess. So I don't know if that answers your question, but no. Okay, thank you.
I have another comment since we have time, unless there's any other question or comment. You mentioned about computer, and I was a bit surprised, and it reminded me when in Israel in the early 90s there was huge immigration from Russia, and I noticed hearing two persons on the bus speaking in Russian, and I heard the word computer come up, and I thought, what's that? They don't have a word for computer in Russian? I'm sure that now they do. With Putin, certainly they do. But at the time, it made me realize of the word in Hebrew and of how it was coined and how it is connected to the family of words regarding computing, regarding calculation, regarding also thinking and importance and consideration, which are part of the same root, coming from the same root. And I suppose I'm just mentioning that as a cultural aspect about the things. And another word which came to my mind was regarding email later in the 90s. And I proposed to the Hebrew Academy a word in Hebrew for email, which was doel, which was doar electroni, doel, email. I had the idea from Quebec where they had courriel, courrier électronique. The word actually caught up. The Academy refused it, but it's in dictionaries, but most people, including myself, use mail. So I'm just adding this because we have time now before we are going to a break. And again, about the cultural contexts of, in this case, Anglicisms or borrowings. Can you add anything on that? Regarding what's it like in Greece? In Greek.
Yes. In Greek, there is no official, apart from the spelling part, there is no official guideline. We do have an academy. The academy makes proposals, but it's not something that is widely used or some people consider it, but in my opinion, it's mainly researchers and professionals who consider that. A lot of these variants are also proposed by other organizations, such as the Hellenic Society for Terminology, ELETO, who also come up with Greek variants, Greek root variants for these words, for Anglicisms mainly. But you know how it is in those things that society really follows their own route. They tend not to pay attention to what people direct them to do. I mean, language is alive, and we all know that. It happens everywhere, I think. Even in countries where there are strict directives towards nationalizing things, I think people use what they want to use. And most of these dictionaries, by the way, even the crowdsourced dictionaries they include these variants, but they are, and also if there is an article out of this in the end, which I hope there will be, I will also try to look at the frequencies in the corpora, the same corpora of the two variants. And I'm sure that the Greek equivalents, completely Greek, are going to be very low compared to the Anglicisms. Thank you.
We don't have any further questions at this stage, so that concludes our session. Thank you very much to our participants, our presenters, to those who've participated in the discussion, and to the silent majority out there. We now have a tea or coffee break, and we will resume at 4 o'clock. Thank you very much.